As to the rest of the news, Walmart, the nation's largest retailer, is now trying to profit off the very people who were fighting back against the power and greed of giant corporations like Walmart. The megastore is selling posters showing occupiers at Zuccotti Park in New York City and selling them for a cool $52. This latest product offering by Walmart will surely enrage members of the Occupy movement, but unfortunately that movement seems to be on life support, and some researchers think they know why. A recent study released by the journal Psychological Science argues that a lack of consensus building is what doomed the Occupy Wall Street movement. The study's researchers write, the inability of liberal Occupy Wall Street protesters to achieve consensus on vital issues ultimately contributed to the movement's failure to develop solidarity and enact political change. Is a lack of consensus building really what hurt the Occupy movement the most? And did the movement fail to enact real and lasting change like the researchers argue? Joining me now for more on the rise and fall of the Occupy movement is Priscilla Grim, participant and spokesperson with Occupy Wall Street, and Nicole Carty, activist and participant in Occupy Wall Street as well. Priscilla, Nicole, welcome to you both.
Hi, thank you.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. First, Priscilla, your thoughts on Walmart cashing in on the Occupy movement?
Well, the first thing to understand is that the poster is actually being sold by a third-party seller through Walmart, so it's just a small business person selling the poster through the big channels that Walmart has to sell items online. Mm-hmm. So actually, the majority of that money from the sale of that particular poster will go to a small business, which is great. However, you know, it is ironic that Occupy Wall Street has been pretty active in the movement to hopefully, in you know, the best case, unionize Walmart. In the even better case, have Walmart that is completely worker-owned. That would be pretty exciting, since 42% of the profits go towards a single family. Yeah. $150 billion is owned by 16 people. Imagine the real transformative change that could happen in this country if either the company or the wealth of that family were nationalized.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Nicole, I'm curious, this study says a lack of consensus, but there were a number of people who were arguing that the demand for consensus that had been brought into the early Occupy Wall Street groups in New York City, largely by the RCP people, the Bobavakian groups and whatnot, you know, demanding that everybody have consensus and there be, quote, no leaders, although they seem to always be presenting somebody to moderate, that was the thing that was gumming things up. Your thoughts on all this?
Well, as a facilitator at Occupy, I can tell you that there's nothing we knew better to do than to actually build real and meaningful consensus. I think what's really interesting about the article that you're referring to that quotes this new research study is that they kind of say liberals are too unique and they want to be special, that's why they can never build consensus, when in actuality, I think in Occupy we did build a consensus, and the problem with why it wasn't picked up by institutions like the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or what have you is because that consensus was generally a systemic critique. And, you know, these parties which are totally part and parcel of those systems are not going to advocate consensus that is at odds with their existence.
Yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. Priscilla, the ability to cause political change requires, doesn't it, something more than just a critique of the system? Doesn't it require something like occupying the system?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, the main point I got out of the article was an overwhelming disappointment that Occupy Wall Street did not join the ranks of the Democratic Party, when the Democratic Party has, you know, certainly failed in its mission in the past 30 years. There's areas in the United States that you go to that as a woman, I cannot get an abortion. You know, families do not have proper support to grow and to be You know, all of these values that supposedly are, you know, populist in nature brought by the Democratic Party, I mean, this is the same party that handed over billions of dollars to the bank system instead of demanding that they be nationalized.
I'm totally with you, Priscilla. The point I was making is back in 2009 and 2010, the Concord Project was distributing DVDs, and you can see the YouTubes of these online, and having these living room meetings all over America, teaching Tea Party folks how to show up at local Republican Party groups, volunteer to be precinct committee people, and the precinct committee chair people decide who are going to be the primary candidates. And so they'd get like 5 people on in the primary, but they were all Tea Partiers, and so it guaranteed the Tea Partiers were going to D.C. Wouldn't that be a useful model to occupy the Democratic Party?
People have been talking about occupying Congress in totem, not just the Democratic Party. And, you know, I would argue that the outreach done through the Tea Party, you know, it just developed an entire generation of obstructionists, which how does that help any of us?
No, I agree. I think it's been net toxic, but it's an example of how an outside group took over a political party. Nicole, your thoughts on this?
I want to add something to this because I think what you're actually talking about, that's not actually how the Tea Party came to power. Maybe that's how the Tea Party began, but if you're looking at why the Tea Party is as powerful as it is in Congress right now, it's because it had huge corporate backers. It was completely bankrolled by Koch brothers, so many huge corporations, and of course that money talks in Washington. It's already talking in Washington, so I think we can't be surprised to see an institution that is completely bankrolled by the corporations which already control to a large part the politics that happen in D.C., being successful there. It totally makes sense, actually. But Occupy wasn't backed by any of these institutions, and thus you see its failure.
Sure. It seems, though, that Occupy actually has had an impact on the progressive movement and on the Democratic Party. It seems, Nicole, like they're not being acknowledged for that.
I absolutely think so. I think that you're definitely seeing a move towards the left in the institutional Democratic Party, but I think furthermore than that, you see a consensus that's growing outside of the political system. People are disenchanted. People don't trust the system to do the things that it's supposed to do. If you look at a study that came out actually the same week as the study you're quoting, it said that 2 out of 3 Americans no longer believe in the American dream, which points to a kind of systemic critique, right, which didn't exist before.